"How did the cupcakes taste, Margaret?" my daughter-in-law Sophia asked over the phone, her voice carrying that familiar edge I had learned to recognize over the past 3 years. I smiled, cradling the phone against my ear as I folded the last of the church tablecloths in my kitchen. "Oh, they were absolutely wonderful, dear. Everyone at the church board meeting raved about them. Pastor William said they were the best cupcakes he'd had in years." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Everyone? You mean, you shared them?" "Of course I did. You brought me a dozen beautiful cupcakes for Mother's Day. That was far too many for just me." I chuckled, remembering how touched I had been by her unexpected gesture that morning. The church board was meeting this afternoon to discuss the upcoming summer programs, and I thought it would be the perfect opportunity to show them off. Helen Rodriguez, our treasurer, asked for the recipe, and Jacob Thompson said his wife would be so jealous. "You gave them away?" Sophia's voice had risen to an almost shrill pitch. "All of them?" Something in her tone made me pause in my folding. "Well, not all of them. I saved 2 for myself, though I haven't eaten them yet. Sophia, are you feeling all right? You sound upset." The silence stretched so long I wondered if the call had dropped. Then I heard what sounded like a sharp intake of breath. "Margaret," Sophia's voice was barely above a whisper now. "Those cupcakes, they weren't regular cupcakes." My heart began to beat faster. "What do you mean?" "They had marijuana in them. They were edibles. I was trying to—" Her voice broke. "I was trying to play a prank on you." The tablecloth slipped from my hands, falling to the kitchen floor in a heap of white cotton. "You did what?" "I thought you would just eat 1 or 2 and get a little silly. Maybe take a nap. I didn't think you would give them to half the congregation." Sophia was crying now, her words tumbling over each other. "Oh God, Margaret, what have I done?" I sank into one of my kitchen chairs, my legs suddenly unable to support me. In my mind, I could see Pastor Williams reaching for his second cupcake during our meeting, commenting on how relaxed he felt. I could picture Helen's confusion when she mentioned feeling funny, right before I left. Jacob had actually said he felt like he was floating. "Sophia," I said, my voice deadly calm despite the storm raging in my chest. "You deliberately brought me illegal drugs disguised as Mother's Day cupcakes." The only answer was her sobbing on the other end of the line. My name is Margaret Bennett, and at 59 years old, I thought I had seen every kind of betrayal life could offer. I live in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where I have been an active member of Trinity Methodist Church for over 30 years. I serve on the church board, coordinate our food drives, and have never missed a Sunday service unless I was deathly ill. My faith and my community mean everything to me. For the past 3 years, ever since my son David married Sophia, I had been walking on eggshells around my daughter-in-law. She was a 32-year-old yoga instructor who moved here from California, and from the beginning, she made it clear that she viewed me as competition for David's attention. Every family dinner became a subtle battlefield where she would make snide comments about my old-fashioned ways or my overbearing concern for my son. David, bless his heart, never seemed to notice the tension. He worked as an engineer at North Peak Engineering, and was often too exhausted from his demanding job to pick up on the undercurrents. When I tried to gently mention Sophia's behavior, he would brush it off with comments like, "You two just need to get to know each other better," or, "She's probably just nervous about fitting in." But I saw the real Sophia. I saw how she rolled her eyes when I shared family stories. I noticed how she would change the subject whenever I mentioned church activities or community events. She made it clear that she thought my lifestyle was boring and restrictive, often making comments about how people in California were more open-minded and less judgmental. Still, when she showed up at my door this morning with a beautiful box of cupcakes decorated with pink frosting and little sugar flowers, I was genuinely moved. She had never brought me anything before, and I thought perhaps we were finally making progress in our relationship. "Happy Mother's Day, Margaret," she had said, actually smiling as she handed me the box. I made these especially for you. They're my grandmother's secret recipe. I had invited her in for coffee, but she claimed she had to rush off to teach a morning yoga class. Just promise me you'll enjoy them, she had said, with what I now realized was a malicious gleam in her eyes. The cupcakes had looked so professional, so lovingly crafted. Each one was topped with swirls of cream cheese frosting and decorated with tiny edible flowers. They smelled heavenly, like vanilla, and something earthy I couldn't quite identify. I had been so touched by what seemed like a genuine gesture of affection that I immediately decided to share them with the people who mattered most to me. Now, as I sat in my kitchen with the phone still pressed to my ear and Sophia's confession echoing in my mind, I realized just how deeply I had been betrayed. This wasn't just a cruel prank. It was an attack on everything I held sacred. The full weight of what had happened hit me like a physical blow. I thought about Pastor Williams, a 72-year-old man with a heart condition, unknowingly consuming illegal drugs. I pictured Helen Rodriguez, who had mentioned feeling dizzy as she left the meeting, driving home in an altered state. The image of Jacob Thompson, a respected business owner in our community, sitting in that board meeting under the influence of marijuana made my stomach turn. "Sophia," I said, my voice shaking with barely controlled rage, "do you have any idea what you've done?" I know, I messed up," she sobbed. "I thought it would just be you, and you would just relax a little. I didn't mean for..." "You didn't mean for what? You didn't mean to drug innocent people who trust me? You didn't mean to potentially harm elderly members of my congregation? You didn't mean to make me an unwilling accomplice in distributing illegal substances?" The kitchen felt like it was spinning around me. I gripped the edge of the table, trying to process the magnitude of what had occurred. In my 40 years of marriage to David's father, in all my years of widowhood since he passed, I had never faced a crisis like this. "Margaret, please, you can't tell anyone it was me," Sophia pleaded. "I could go to jail for this. My yoga studio would be ruined. David would never forgive me." Her words ignited something fierce and protective in my chest. "You should have thought about that before you decided to use Mother's Day as an opportunity to poison me with illegal drugs. I wasn't trying to poison you. People use edibles all the time in California. It's not a big deal there. I just wanted you to loosen up a little. Maybe see that the world isn't as black and white as you think." The audacity of her words left me speechless for a moment. She was actually trying to justify her actions, as if drugging someone without their consent was some kind of enlightened gesture. "Sophia, I need to hang up now. I have to call Pastor Williams and make sure everyone is okay." "Wait, Margaret, please." I ended the call and immediately dialed Pastor Williams' number. My hands were trembling so badly I had to redial twice. "Pastor Williams, it's Margaret Bennett. I need to ask you something very important. Are you feeling all right? Did you notice anything unusual after our meeting today?" His voice sounded tired and confused. "Well, now that you mention it, Margaret, I did feel rather strange when I got home. Barbara said I seemed disoriented, and I've been having the most peculiar thoughts. Is everything okay?" My heart sank as I realized the nightmare was just beginning. I was going to have to tell this good man, this pillar of our community, that I had unknowingly given him marijuana. The shame and horror of it threatened to overwhelm me, but I knew I had to do the right thing, no matter how devastating the consequences might be. "Pastor Williams, I need you to sit down," I said, my voice heavy with dread. "Something terrible has happened, and it's my fault." I could hear him settling into a chair on the other end of the line. "Margaret, you're frightening me. What's going on?" Taking a deep breath, I forced myself to say the words that felt like poison in my mouth. "The cupcakes I brought to the board meeting today contained marijuana. I just found out from my daughter-in-law that she made them with illegal drugs, and I unknowingly served them to all of you." The silence that followed was deafening. When Pastor Williams finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. "Are you telling me that Helen Jacob, Patricia, and I have all been under the influence? I'm so sorry, I choked out. I had no idea. Sophia brought them as a Mother's Day gift, and I thought it was such a thoughtful gesture. I never imagined she would do something like this. Margaret, we need to handle this very carefully, Pastor Williams said, his pastoral training kicking in despite his obvious shock. First, I need to call Barbara and have her take me to the hospital to make sure I'm okay. Then I'll contact the others. We need to make sure everyone is safe. After I hung up with the pastor, I immediately called Helen Rodriguez. Her husband answered, and I could hear the concern in his voice when he told me Helen had been acting very strange since she got home from the church meeting. She's been sitting in the garden talking to the flowers, Margaret. She said they were having a conversation with her about their feelings. I was about to call a doctor. My heart broke a little more with each phone call. Jacob Thompson's wife told me he had spent the past 2 hours convinced that their cat was speaking to him in complete sentences. Patricia Wells had apparently become fascinated with the patterns in her wallpaper and had been staring at them for an hour, claiming they were breathing. Each conversation was more horrifying than the last. These were respected members of our community, people who had never so much as had a drink before dinner, and they had all been drugged without their knowledge or consent. When I finally worked up the courage to call my son David, I could barely get the words out through my tears. "Mom, slow down," he said. "What happened? Are you hurt?" "David, your wife brought me cupcakes for Mother's Day. They had marijuana in them. She admitted she was trying to play a prank on me, but I gave them to the church board." Pastor Williams, Helen, Jacob, and Patricia have all been affected. The silence that followed was so long, I thought the call had dropped. When David finally spoke, his voice was cold and controlled in a way I had never heard before. "She did what?" "She said she was trying to make me loosen up, that it wasn't a big deal because people in California use edibles all the time. David, these people trust me. They're good, innocent people, and now they're suffering because of something I gave them." "Mom, this is not your fault. You had no way of knowing. Where is Sophia now?" "I don't know. She was crying when I hung up on her, begging me not to tell anyone it was her." David's laugh was bitter and humorless. "Well, that's not going to happen. She's going to take responsibility for this, one way or another. I'm coming over." As I waited for David to arrive, I paced my kitchen like a caged animal. The beautiful Mother's Day cupcakes still sat on my counter, the 2 I hadn't given away looking innocent and harmless. I couldn't bring myself to throw them away. They were evidence now. Evidence of my daughter-in-law's betrayal, and my own unwitting participation in what amounted to drugging half the church board. David arrived at my house 20 minutes later, his face a mask of fury I had rarely seen. He stormed into my kitchen and stared at the remaining cupcakes as if they were venomous snakes. "I can't believe she did this," he said, running his hands through his hair. "I can't believe my own wife would do something so reckless, so cruel." Before I could respond, my phone rang. It was Pastor Williams calling back. "Margaret, I'm at the hospital now. The doctor wants to keep me for observation, and he's recommending that the others come in as well. He said that giving someone marijuana without their knowledge can be dangerous, especially for people our age who might have underlying health conditions." My worst fears were being realized. "Pastor, I am so sorry. I don't know how to make this right. Margaret, you didn't do anything wrong, but we need to discuss how to handle this situation. The hospital is required to report suspected drug poisoning to the police. This is going to become a legal matter." After I hung up, David was looking at me with a mixture of sympathy and determination. "Mom, we need to call the police ourselves. Sophia committed a crime, and she needs to face the consequences." "But David, she's your wife. And if this becomes public, it will destroy both of your reputations. The whole community will know." "Good," he said, his voice hard. Maybe then everyone will see what I'm apparently too blind to notice. How long has she been treating you badly, Mom? Really? I sank into my chair, suddenly exhausted. It's been 3 years of little comments, eye rolls, and passive-aggressive behavior. She's never liked me, David. She thinks I'm too involved in your life, too old-fashioned, too religious. But I never thought she would stoop to something like this. David pulled out his phone. I'm calling her. When Sophia answered, David put the call on speaker. Her voice was small and shaky. David, did your mom tell you what happened? You mean, did she tell me that you drugged her with illegal substances on Mother's Day? Yeah, she told me. And now Pastor Williams is in the hospital, along with 3 other innocent people you poisoned. It wasn't supposed to happen like that. Sophia's voice rose defensively. It was just supposed to be Margaret, and she was just supposed to relax a little. I wasn't trying to hurt anyone. But you were trying to hurt my mother, David said, his voice deadly quiet. You deliberately gave her drugs without her consent because you wanted to see her lose control. You wanted to humiliate her. That's not... I just thought maybe if she experienced something different, she might be less judgmental about things. I watched my son's face transform with disgust. Less judgmental? Sophia, my mother has never been anything but kind to you. She's bent over backward to welcome you into this family, and this is how you repay her? Your mother doesn't like me, David. She thinks I'm not good enough for you, and she makes that clear every time we're together. That's in your head, David exploded. My mother has never said a single negative word about you to me. But you know what? After today, she wouldn't be wrong if she had concerns. I could hear Sophia crying on the other end of the line. David, please. I made a mistake. I'll apologize to everyone. I'll make it right. You'll make it right by turning yourself into the police, David said. Because if you don't, I will. The line went dead. David stared at his phone for a moment, then looked at me with eyes full of pain and regret. Mom, I'm so sorry. I should have seen this coming. I should have protected you. The next few hours passed in a blur of phone calls, police reports, and hospital visits. Officer Reynolds from the Tulsa Police Department came to my house to take my statement, treating me with the kindness and respect I had always known from our local law enforcement. When I explained the situation, his face grew increasingly serious. Mrs. Bennett, what your daughter-in-law did constitutes several serious crimes, he said as he took notes. Administering a controlled substance without consent, reckless endangerment, and depending on the outcome with the people who were affected, potentially more serious charges. David had insisted on being present for the interview, and I watched his face grow paler with each charge Officer Reynolds listed. The district attorney will likely want to prosecute this case to the full extent of the law, the officer continued, especially given that elderly community leaders were involved and that medical attention was required. After Officer Reynolds left, David and I drove to the hospital to check on Pastor Williams and the others. The scene there was heartbreaking. Pastor Williams looked frail and confused in his hospital bed, with his wife Barbara holding his hand and looking shell-shocked. Margaret, dear, Barbara said when she saw me. Pastor Williams told me what happened. None of this is your fault. But I felt the weight of responsibility crushing me anyway. Helen Rodriguez was in the next room, still disoriented and struggling to understand what had happened to her. Her husband Carlos looked at me with such pain in his eyes. She keeps asking me if she's losing her mind, he said quietly. She's never experienced anything like this before. She's terrified that something is permanently wrong with her. Dad Jacob Thompson and Patricia Wells were in similar states, confused, frightened, and dealing with the aftermath of being unknowingly drugged. Patricia's daughter had driven up from Dallas when she heard what happened, and she was demanding answers about who could have done such a thing to her mother. As we left the hospital, David was unusually quiet. Finally, as we sat in his car in the parking lot, he spoke. I have to divorce her, don't I? The question hung in the air between us. I wanted to tell him that marriages could survive anything, that people could change, that love could overcome betrayal. But as I thought about the innocent people lying in those hospital beds, people who trusted me and ended up suffering because of my daughter-in-law's malicious prank, I couldn't bring myself to encourage him to forgive her. David, that's a decision only you can make, I said finally. But I can tell you that I will never feel safe around Sophia again. What she did wasn't just a prank. It was a deliberate act of cruelty designed to humiliate me. And the fact that it hurt innocent people who had nothing to do with whatever issues she has with me makes it unforgivable. David nodded slowly. She's been texting me nonstop, begging me to come home so we can work this out. But how do you work out something like this? How do I ever trust her again? As if summoned by our conversation, David's phone buzzed with another text from Sophia. He glanced at it and his jaw tightened. She says she's talked to a lawyer. She wants to know if she can claim it was an accident, that she mixed up the regular cupcakes with the edibles by mistake. The audacity of it took my breath away. Even now, faced with the consequences of her actions, Sophia was looking for ways to avoid taking responsibility. She was prepared to lie to the police, to add perjury to her list of crimes, all to save herself from the consequences of her deliberate act of malice. David, I said quietly, I think that tells you everything you need to know about your wife's character. The truth about what Sophia had done spread through our community like wildfire. By Monday morning, it seemed like everyone in Tulsa knew that David Bennett's wife had drugged the Trinity Methodist Church board with marijuana cupcakes. The story was so outrageous, so unbelievable, that it took on a life of its own. I was at the grocery store when I overheard two women in the produce section discussing it. Can you imagine? One of them said. Those poor church people probably thought they were losing their minds. And poor Margaret Bennett. She's such a sweet woman. How humiliating for her. The irony wasn't lost on me. Sophia had intended to humiliate me, to make me look foolish and out of control. Instead, her cruel plan had backfired spectacularly. The community's sympathy was entirely with me and the other victims, while Sophia had become the subject of shocked whispers and disapproving stares. Pastor Williams called me Tuesday morning with an update. Margaret, I wanted you to know that all 4 of us are pressing charges. The district attorney's office contacted us yesterday, and they're treating this as a very serious matter. I felt a mixture of relief and sadness. Relief that justice would be served, but sadness that it had come to this. How are you feeling, Pastor? Much better, thank you. The doctor said no permanent damage was done, but it was a frightening experience. Helen is still shaken up, and Jacob's wife is furious. Patricia's daughter is talking about filing a civil lawsuit as well. When I hung up, I realized that Sophia's harmless prank was going to cost her far more than she had ever imagined. Criminal charges, civil lawsuits, the destruction of her yoga business, and the loss of her marriage. All because she couldn't resist the urge to humiliate me. 3 weeks later, I sat in the courtroom watching my former daughter-in-law face the consequences of her actions. She looked small and defeated in her conservative blue dress, nothing like the confident yoga instructor who had knocked on my door that Mother's Day morning with her poisoned gift. The prosecutor laid out the charges methodically. 4 counts of administering a controlled substance without consent, reckless endangerment, and possession of marijuana with intent to distribute. Each charge carried significant penalties, and Sophia's lawyer looked increasingly uncomfortable as the case proceeded. When it came time for victim impact statements, Pastor Williams spoke first. His words were measured but powerful, as he described the fear and confusion he had experienced, not knowing what was happening to his mind and body. Helen Rodriguez spoke about the violation of trust, how she had questioned her own sanity. Jacob Thompson's voice shook with anger as he described the terror his family had experienced. Patricia Wells read a statement from her daughter about the lasting emotional trauma. When it was my turn to speak, I stood and looked directly at Sophia. "You gave me those cupcakes on Mother's Day, claiming they were made with love from your grandmother's recipe. But they were made with malice, designed to humiliate and harm me. The fact that your cruelty hurt innocent people who had nothing to do with our relationship makes your actions unforgivable." Sophia's lawyer had tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the district attorney refused. The case was too public, the victims too sympathetic, and the crime too serious. When the judge announced the sentence, 18 months in prison, followed by probation, community service, and restitution to the victims, Sophia finally broke down completely. David wasn't in the courtroom. He had filed for divorce the week after the incident and moved back in with me temporarily while he searched for his own place. In the months that followed, Sophia's life unraveled completely. Her yoga studio closed within weeks of her arrest, as clients fled in horror when they learned what she had done. The marijuana charges made it impossible for her to find work in the fitness industry, and her criminal record followed her wherever she went. Several of her former clients joined Patricia Wells' daughter in filing civil lawsuits, seeking damages for the emotional trauma and breach of trust. The legal fees and settlements drained what little savings she had left from the failed business. When she was released from prison, Sophia found herself essentially unemployable in Tulsa. The community's memory was long, and her reputation as the woman who drugged innocent church members with marijuana cupcakes preceded her everywhere. She eventually moved back to California, where she struggled to rebuild her life while dealing with the lasting consequences of her actions. David never spoke to her again after the divorce was finalized, and she spent years writing letters of apology that went unanswered. The simple act of malice that was meant to last a few hours had destroyed her entire future. As for me, I found peace in knowing that justice had been served, and that my community had rallied around me during the darkest moment of my life. The church board grew even closer after our shared ordeal, and I continued my service with renewed purpose, knowing that sometimes the most unexpected betrayals can reveal the true strength of the bonds that matter most. Looking back on that terrible Mother's Day, I realized that Sophia's attempt at revenge had ultimately revealed her own character, while strengthening everything she had tried to destroy. And in that way, justice had been more complete than I could have ever planned.